Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere. Hot, ancient, and full of heavy lifting. Welcome to the construction site of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's early morning, the desert horizon still bathed in soft rose light, and you're standing ankle deep in sand. In the distance, a flock of ibises scatter with that long-legged hop they do, while behind you someone yells in ancient Egyptian for you to move faster. You haven't had breakfast yet. You might not get one at all if you don't show up on time. Before you get too cozy, a quick note: this job isn't easy. You're going to be dragging stones the size of bathtubs across a sun-blasted plain, dodging snappy overseers and dodgier camels. You'll smell like sweat onions and limestone for weeks. And honestly, you probably won't survive this job if you slack off, but still, something about that shimmering monument to be makes you keep going. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. So drop that in the comments too. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're squinting toward a vast, dusty expanse where nothing seems organized yet, just flat land mounds of earth and a few anxious donkeys. Somewhere out here, buried beneath sand and confusion, the base of the pyramid will soon be marked. You're part of the setup crew here before the first blocks are even carved. Today's job: clear the area and make it level enough to fool the gods. Easier said than done when you're using only copper chisels rope and the occasional shouting supervisor. Your feet crunch over ground that's uneven and rocky. All around you, dozens of workers form an informal line, hacking away at bumps in the bedrock. There are no machines here, just determination, blunt tools, and backs that haven't stopped aching since last flood season. Nearby, a grizzled foreman in a faded linen kilt shouts directions. His voice is hoarse, maybe from dust or years of yelling over the wind. He waves his staff at a slope of stone and tells you to start chipping away until the ground is as flat as Ra's chariot. Not exactly a precise unit of measure, but you get the idea. You're not alone. A goat, yes, a goat, is tethered nearby, chewing on someone's discarded lunch sack. It eyes you as if daring you to take a break. You don't. That goat has seen things. While you swing your hammer against a stubborn rock ledge, someone beside you starts humming a work chant. Others join in, low and steady. It helps pass the time, keeps everyone moving in rhythm. The beat has been sung for generations, passed down since the earliest dynasties. You catch yourself joining in, whether from cultural pride or mild sunstroke, you're not sure. There's a real science to this flatness business. Ancient Egyptian builders used plumb bobs and knotted cords, stretched taut to detect any unevenness. Later, they'll flood shallow trenches to watch how water settles. If it flows to one side, they know the ground still needs leveling. For now, though, your job is simpler: remove anything that's sticking up, including your pride. As midday nears, the sun climbs higher, and you start to sweat in places you didn't know could sweat. Someone tosses you a scrap of linen to tie around your head. It smells faintly of onions and someone else's armpit, but you don't complain. In this heat, you'd wear a dead pigeon if it offered shade. A passing cart rolls by, pulled by two oxen with bored, resigned expressions. On it rides one of the royal engineers. He's fanning himself with a palm leaf and sipping from a clay jug. His job: checking angles and pretending his sandals don't hurt. You think about asking him for water, but the look on his face says no. Also, there's a guard with a spear. As you scrape and dig, you pause now and then to sip from your own water skin. It's warm, it tastes vaguely of goat skin, and it's the best thing you've had all day. You wipe your brow with your wrist glance at the half-built storage hut nearby, and wonder how long this project is really going to take. Historians still argue whether the ground was fully leveled, using copper saws with abrasive sand, or if they relied more on manual chiseling and intuition. Some even believe advanced techniques were passed down secretly through temple schools, known only to elite stonecutters sworn to silence. Whatever the case, by mid-afternoon, your hands are blistered and your arms feel like jelly. But when the foreman climbs a small mound, looks across the site, and gives a slow nod, you feel proud. Tired but proud. The first base level is nearly complete. Tomorrow they'll begin marking out the pyramid's footprint using ropes, stars, and sacred geometry. You, for now, are allowed to sit in the shade and gnaw on a piece of barley bread so dry it could be used as mortar. As the sun sinks behind the hills, turning the sand to a warm gold, you watch the workers begin their slow retreat to the village quarters. A cart tips over. A young boy chases a runaway goose. The goat is somehow still chewing that same lunch sack. And you stretch your aching back and let your hands rest on the cool carved stone beneath you. The next morning begins earlier than the sun. You're up before the ibis cries and before the goat can once again resume its vigil of chewing through everything you own. A faint chill clings to the desert floor, though you know it won't last. The sand beneath your feet is cool, but not for long. Today's task is a special one. You're working with the surveyors. These are no ordinary laborers. The men arriving now walk with purpose, their linen robes cleaner, their sandals less frayed. One carries a long knotted cord slung across his shoulders, another bears a plumb bob, carved from polished stone. One of them is already mumbling star names under his breath. They're here to map out the footprint of the pyramid. No bricks have been laid yet, but the gods demand precision. The base must be square, so square that even future archaeologists with lasers will raise their eyebrows in disbelief. You'll be assisting in this sacred geometry, which mostly means holding stuff and pretending to understand fractions. One of the surveyors, a tall man with ink-stained fingers and a very dramatic hairstyle, directs you to hold one end of a rope. The rope has evenly spaced knots, each measuring about 20 royal cubits. He instructs you to walk slowly, stretching it taut, while he carefully drives a wooden peg into the soil at the mark. You see that he mutters, pointing to the knot closest to your foot. That's where we'll summon the west wall. You're not sure if he means metaphorically or through divine intervention, but either way you nod. They work in teams of 3, 1 to sight the line 1 to measure the distance, and 1 to mutter complex calculations about Sekhed, the ancient Egyptian concept of slope. The word sounds soft and sleepy, like a lullaby disguised as trigonometry. Above you, the sun has begun its climb. You shade your eyes and catch sight of the horizon. Another group of workers walks past in the distance, singing a call and response chant about brickmaking. One verse includes the phrase, "Don't eat the sand," which feels like valuable advice. Back at your rope line, a small dispute has broken out over whether one of the wooden pegs is leaning. The man with the dramatic hairstyle insists it's perfect. The younger assistant disagrees, whispering something about the angle of Sirius the dog star. You watch as the disagreement is resolved the traditional way: a third man eats a date and changes the subject. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians used only simple sighting tools or if they employed more complex optical instruments lost to time. Some even speculate that water-filled trenches were used to level the ground across great distances, turning the site into a shallow lake. You'd believe it anything to avoid walking this rope back and forth in the blazing sun. As the day progresses, your tasks shift. You're now holding the end of a merkit, a star-tracking instrument that resembles a cross between a plumb bob and a very judgmental stick. It's used at night, but this is rehearsal. The chief surveyor explains how it works with exaggerated patience, as if speaking to a goat. You nod solemnly. You align the merkit with a fixed star. He says then mark the point where the plumb line falls. His voice slows as he speaks. The stars never lie, except when there are clouds, or wind, or bad dreams. Later, as the sun reaches its peak and shadows vanish, the team announces with satisfaction that the square has been marked. The pegs form a perfect rectangle, each side measured in royal cubits, each angle allegedly right-angled to within the width of a fig seed. There's a small ceremony. A priest appears barefoot, chanting softly and scattering what you think is natron across the soil. He holds a bronze mirror and uses it to reflect the sunlight across the newly measured space. It glints briefly on your face and you feel oddly blessed, or lightly blinded. A clay tablet is produced and marked with the day's results. You're tempted to sign your name, but you remember you can't actually write. So instead, you draw a tiny picture of a goat behind the tablet when no one's looking. Now, the base is staked, measured, and sanctified. It may not look like much, just a patch of dusty desert with some pegs and string, but in this ancient world, it's a promise. A promise that something enormous is about to rise, one stone at a time. By late afternoon, the work pauses. The surveyors retreat to their tent to debate stars and sip sweet beer brewed with date syrup. You sit outside, tracing your finger in the sand and thinking about how oddly peaceful it is out here. Your back aches from bending and your arm is sore from holding the rope, but your mind is quiet. You've stared at the sky so long today that you almost feel like you understand it. Almost. As you lie back on a patch of shaded stone, a breeze picks up. It carries the scent of baked earth sweat and the distant sweetness of figs. You let your eyes close for a moment. The pyramid isn't even a single stone high yet, but you're here, a part of it, measuring it into existence. And somewhere off in the distance, the goat is watching you. You don't even have time to wipe the sand from your eyes before the quarry overseer is shouting again. Today, it's your turn in the limestone pits. You trudge down the slope into the quarry's carved belly where the air feels hotter and the echoes bounce like invisible birds. The sun's heat is magnified here, trapped between rock walls already scuffed smooth by sandals and sleds. A few workers have beaten you to it. They're already hammering into stone, sparks glinting like brief stars. The limestone is pale and dusty, its texture somewhere between chalk and stubborn soap. These are the blocks that will form the pyramid's outer body. The good stuff, the polished, near-white casing stones, comes from farther south, but the bulk of your job is right here, cut, shape, and haul until your fingers go numb. You're handed a copper chisel and a wooden mallet, both of which have clearly seen better centuries. You kneel next to a marked line drawn in red ochre. The master cutter grunts something that sounds like, "Follow the line, not your feelings," then walks off to yell at someone else. You begin to hammer. Each blow sends a tingling vibration up your arms. The stone is tougher than it looks, and copper tools wear down quickly. Every few minutes, you switch between chiseling and sharpening, like some kind of dusty, ancient metronome. Somewhere to your left, someone starts whistling. A worker a few yards away responds by rhythmically tapping his mallet in tune. And just like that, a kind of quarry orchestra begins, stone percussion and copper melody echoing up the quarry walls like a very gritty lullaby. Historians still debate the exact methods used for quarrying. Some believe copper chisels were augmented with sand as an abrasive. Others argue they used dolerite pounders, harder stones shaped into spheres. In fact, you spot one such stone now abandoned near a pile of rubble. It looks like something that fell off a giant's necklace. You pick it up, give it an experimental thud against the rock wall. It doesn't so much chip as insist the stone gives way. Not bad. A foreman waves you over to help with a new block. It's already partially detached, cut along three sides like a loaf of bread, missing one last slice. Your job: wedge in wooden shims, soak them with water, and let the expansion crack the stone free. It's slow, satisfying work. The wood drinks greedily, swelling in the heat. Moments later, with a groan like a sleepy elephant, the block begins to shift. You and two others lean in, grunting and straining, until the limestone slab breaks loose. It falls with a dull thud, raising a puff of white dust that coats your arms and hair. You look like a very tired ghost. While others prepare ropes and sleds to haul the stone away, you take a moment to stretch and sip from your water skin. The water is warm again, but you don't care. You spot a clay jug resting on a nearby ledge. It's someone else's lunch wine, no doubt tempting, but dangerous. You settle for a dried fig from your pouch instead. A boy scampers past, yelling something about a loose ox. Everyone ignores him. The ox will be found eventually. They always are, usually chewing on someone's tent. In the distance, a group of oxen is already being guided toward a sled. You watch as ropes are looped, knots checked. One man sprinkles water onto the sandy path. This, you've learned, reduces friction, allowing the sled to glide more easily. It seems absurd, but it works. The block is rolled into place. Men heave and pull, shouting in rhythm, sandals skidding. The sled creaks like an old man sitting down too quickly. Inch by inch, the stone begins its journey from quarry to pyramid. You follow behind, brushing limestone dust from your arms. Your hands feel like they're carved from the same material you've been hammering all day, but there's satisfaction in this real sunburned progress. Along the quarry rim, a priest in white linen watches with vague disinterest. He's here to bless the tools or perhaps just enjoy the breeze. You catch a whiff of myrrh as he walks by, muttering something about divine balance and don't chip the corners. The sun begins its slow descent, the shadows lengthen. You watch the sled vanish over the rise, heading toward the construction site, where it'll be shaped and fitted into place. You look down at your own feet. You're standing in a pit covered in dust, aching in all directions. And yet, there's a strange comfort in knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring: more hammering, more sleds, more soft chants to drown out the strain. And maybe, if you're lucky, a fig that isn't half sand. The sun's not even over the horizon when you arrive at the laborers' village, your new temporary home. It sits just beyond the pyramid site, a sprawling settlement of low mud brick houses, dusty lanes, and the hum of thousands of tired but determined people. You blink the sand from your eyes and shuffle through the narrow gate past a wall covered in scratched drawings and crude jokes someone etched with a stick. One shows a man dropping a stone on his foot. You hope it isn't a prophecy. Inside, the village is already stirring. Bread smoke drifts through the cool morning air. Children scamper between homes, chasing each other with scraps of linen tied to sticks. You navigate around a puddle of spilled beer mash and make your way to your assigned quarters, a single-room structure made of sun-dried mud with a flat roof and exactly one tiny window that lets in more flies than light. It's not spacious, but you'll share it with only 3 other workers. Luxury by ancient standards. Your sleeping mat is a woven palm frond affair, softer than bear stone, but not by much. A clay jar of drinking water stands in the corner next to a bundle of extra linen wraps and someone's emergency stash of dried fish. You're told not to touch it unless you want a black eye. Outside, the central lane of the village is buzzing with activity. A line of workers shuffles toward the communal bakery, each holding a small clay token, marked with their work detail. These tokens are used to claim rations, bread, beer, and if you're lucky, a single blessed onion. You join the queue, eyeing the ovens. The smell is earthy and warm, a kind of sour steam rising from loaves baked on hot stones. A woman with forearms like bricks hands you a chunk of bread wrapped in leaves. You thank her. She grunts. It's a transactional sort of affection. Back at your doorway, you sit and chew quietly, listening to the clatter of tools and conversation. Someone nearby is bragging about how he once helped lift the corner block of Djozer's step pyramid all by himself. Someone else challenges him to repeat the feat immediately. The entire village is like this one-part hard-working, one-part theatrical exaggeration. There's a graffiti wall not far from the bakery that tells most of the stories. Hotep stole my beer. Ranifer kisses like a camel. The gods see your lazy feet. It's all very motivational. There's a designated place for washing, too, just a cluster of basins fed by carried water. You dip your arms in, watching the white dust swirl away like melting chalk. The basin smells faintly of sweat, soapwort, and hope. Historians still argue about the size and organization of these laborer villages. Some believe thousands lived here at once, rotating in shifts. Others suggest more seasonal crews arriving and departing with the Nile's flood calendar. But nearly everyone agrees the workers were well-fed, relatively well-treated, and highly skilled. Skilled enough to leave behind more than just pyramids. In a nearby hut, you peek inside and see someone carving a tiny hippo from limestone scrap. It's painted with blue glaze, and the craftsman whistles while he paints the tail. This isn't part of the official pyramid build, it's just for fun. Art sneaks in even here. Later in the day, after your shift, you wander through the small marketplace that forms at the southern edge of the village. It's not formal, just mats on the ground. People trading spare tools, extra bread, or trinkets carved from bone. One man tries to sell you a protective amulet, shaped suspiciously like a flattened frog. You politely decline. He insists it wards off blisters. You still decline. The village healer has a stall nearby set under a woven reed canopy. Dried herbs hang from a string, and the scent of crushed mint fills the air. She's applying crocodile fat salve to a man's cracked heels while muttering about imbalanced humors. You pretend not to listen, then quietly buy a jar for your aching elbows. Your favorite part of the village is the shade tent, a large awning supported by date palm poles where workers collapse in the late afternoon. You sit there now, nursing a cup of thick beer that tastes like someone stirred barley with a sandal, and yet it's cooling, comforting, and it makes the sunburn itch a little less. A cat, where did the cat come from, hops onto your lap. It's dusty and missing half its tail, but purring like it owns the place. You scratch behind its ears. It yawns and blinks at you slowly. Cats have it all figured out. By nightfall, lanterns glow in the streets, small oil bowls with flickering flames. You pass a musician playing a three-stringed lute, humming something you don't recognize. His fingers move like water. A few people clap along. A child dances clumsily in a circle, knocking over a pot. You crawl back into your room, roll out your mat, and pull your linen wrap over your shoulder. The air has cooled, and outside the sound of laughter fades to murmurs. You close your eyes to the faint smell of brick dust and charcoal. Somewhere a goat bleats in the distance. You don't know if you dream, but when you wake, there's bread at the door, and another long day ahead. You wake to the sound of crunching someone chewing breakfast, far too enthusiastically outside your door. It's barely dawn, but the laborers' village is already stirring. You roll up your linen wrap and step into the dusty morning where the air still holds a slight blessed coolness. By noon, the sun will turn everything into a griddle, including your eyebrows. Your stomach rumbles. It's time for breakfast. You shuffle into the long line outside the mess tent where workers gather under a woven reed awning. The air smells of yeast, onions, and dust. In front of you, a man with a limp argues with a cook about the size of his bread ration. Behind you, someone sneezes into a clay jug and offers it around anyway. You decline. Finally, it's your turn. You hand over your clay token, and in return receive a hearty lump of barley bread, a scoop of mashed beans, and of course a generous portion of raw onions. You stare at the onions, wondering if your digestive system will ever truly forgive you. Probably not. You find a seat on a flat stone and begin to eat. The bread is dense, heavy, and slightly burnt on one side. It could double as a building material. The beans are beige. But the onions, pungent and sharp, clear your sinuses instantly and make your eyes water in a way that feels both emotional and medical. A few others sit nearby. One man dips his bread in beer, claiming it wakes the mouth. Another swears that the foreman gave him extra onions because of his beautiful handwriting. You all nod solemnly. That makes as much sense as anything else. Despite the simplicity, this breakfast has been fueling pyramid builders for years. Archaeological finds confirm it. Bread beans, garlic, leeks, and beer made up the core laborer diet. Rich in calories and easy to prepare in large quantities, it wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Historians still debate whether meat was served regularly. Some evidence suggests that high-performing crews received goat or fish, occasionally perhaps as rewards. You wouldn't say no to a goat kebab, but for now it's onions or bust. As you chew, a priest walks past carrying a small censer. He wafts smoke over the kitchen tent while muttering blessings. The cook responds with a loud sneeze and continues stirring a pot with a stick the size of your arm. Sacred hygiene achieved. Someone points to the sky clouds, thin ones feathering across the horizon like forgotten linen strips. A rare treat in this heat. You finish your food and sip the last of your beer, thick and yeasty like someone mashed bread into soup. It's oddly satisfying. You wash your hands in a shared basin and wipe them on your wrap. Just as you're about to head to the quarry again, your team leader appears. Hauling duty, he says. Block crew 3. They need more bodies. You groan but nod. Better hauling than chiseling. At least there's movement wind in your face and a chance to shout rhythm chants without being told to hush. As you walk past the village boundary, your path takes you through the bakery compound. Loaves are being shaped by hand pressed into dome molds and stacked in long rows on hot stones. The smell is intoxicating, a mix of ash grain and toasted dreams. One baker sees you watching and flips you a burnt crust. You catch it midair. He grins. That's as close to a raise as you'll ever get. Before you reach the sled yard, you pass the worker's herb patch, a carefully tended rectangle of onions, garlic, and maybe some wilted leeks. Someone has tied tiny scraps of linen to a post each with a wish or a joke scribbled on it. May my bread not crack my tooth. Let the goat get diarrhea, you smirk. On the way to the hauling team, you see a new crew arriving, fresh laborers from the Delta. Their clothes are cleaner, their eyes wide. One of them trips over a tent rope. The veterans laugh but help him up. In 3 days, he'll be just as dusty as the rest of you. Your own belly full and limbs awake, you head toward the sleds where limestone blocks await. But for now, with the taste of onions still lingering, you feel grounded. There's comfort in this repetition. Bread beans jokes sweat. You were worried you'd grow tired of it. But somehow, you already crave tomorrow's breakfast. You meet your hauling crew at the edge of the sled yard, where a dozen massive limestone blocks sit on wooden runners. Each block weighs as much as 5 camels and is about as cooperative. The sun is climbing now, already sharp enough to sting your eyes. Someone hands you a coil of rope, rough and fibrous, with bits of sand permanently worked into its strands. You loop it over your shoulder and prepare to drag a block that refuses to move unless an entire team grunts at it in perfect harmony. The foreman, a compact man with calves like tree trunks, claps his hands. Team 3 to the sled. Use the rhythm chant. No slacking. He says this like it's the first time any of you have hauled a stone before. It is not. You join 10 others on the rope line, each grabbing a section feet planted in the sand. A worker at the front starts the chant loud and rhythmic. Push the sun, pull the sky. Move the stone or you will die. It's an exaggeration. Probably. You lean forward and pull in unison. The sled jerks, groans, then lurches forward with a low wooden squeal. Sand shifts beneath your feet, kicking up in tiny clouds. Another worker walks ahead with a pot of water splashing the path in front of the sled. The damp sand reduces friction, turning what would be impossible into merely exhausting. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians used water to move stones, but evidence from tomb paintings and one brilliant little diagram found in the tomb of Jehotiotep suggests they did. Without it, the drag would have been unbearable. With it, just backbreaking. You pull again. Step. Pull. Chant. Your world narrows to sand, sweat rope, and song. The rhythm settles into your bones. It's hypnotic, like rowing a boat through honey. A hot, dusty boat made of rock and mild despair. Behind you, a young man slips and falls. The chant falters. The block jerks. You all groan in unison as momentum breaks. The foreman rolls his eyes and helps him up. Use your legs. Not your back, he yells, though you suspect he yells that in his sleep too. You start again, this time smoother. The chant picks up faster now. Sled of stone, we bend the land. Leave no tracks upon the sand. Eventually, the block clears the flat yard and reaches the ramp, an enormous sloping path of compacted earth and brick. This is how the stones reach the pyramid's upper levels. You've heard there are 3 different ramps, some say straight, some zigzagging, others wrapping around like a snail shell. No one agrees, not even the architects. What's clear is this getting a block up, that ramp is an act of stubborn will. You brace your feet and lean into the inclined legs, burning shoulders screaming. The block creeps upward inch by inch, the sled groaning like an old man being asked to dance. A pair of oxen are brought in to assist. They snort and paw the earth less than thrilled. Ropes are tied around their harnesses and yours, and for one glorious moment you feel like you have animal backup. Then the oxen stop to chew on a passing worker's linen sash. A brief scuffle follows. You all pretend not to see it. You reach the midpoint of the ramp where another team takes over. You slump to the side, arms jelly, knees shaking. Someone hands you a lukewarm jug of beer. It tastes like sour bread soaked in sunshine. You drain it. You lie back in the sand and look up at the structure taking shape. It's still just a stub, just a base and a handful of blocks. But it's already massive. Massive in the way mountains are massive, ancient, inevitable. You wonder how long this will take. 20 years, maybe more. You may never live to see the top or the golden capstone placed in ceremony, but you'll know every time your arms ache that you helped carry one of those stones. Nearby, someone is sketching in the sand with a stick, a man pulling a block, a tiny ox, a stick figure with exaggerated muscles. Probably you. Probably not flattering. As the sun reaches its peak, the foreman blows a conch shell to signal the midday break. You stagger toward the shade tent, wiping sweat from your brow, sand in your teeth. A young boy runs past holding an empty water jug, yelling something about the goat is on the ramp again. Of course it is. You collapse onto a pile of mats, eyes half closed. You've dragged stone across burning sand using rope, rhythm, and spit. And tomorrow you'll do it all again. But for now, your legs thank you, and so does the ramp. The ramp sprawls before you like a giant sunburnt serpent, sloping, cracking, winding its way up toward the half-formed pyramid, like it's trying to coil around the sun itself. You're standing at its base again, squinting through heat shimmer at a line of blocks being dragged upward. You've graduated from grunt hauling today. Now you're on ramp maintenance duty, a role with less glory, but equally devastating calf soreness. The ramps, yes, plural, because there are many, are the arteries of the entire operation. Made of mud brick limestone chippings and packed earth, these giant paths form the only way up for the massive stones. Some run straight from the ground to the base. Others zigzag like angry snakes. No one can agree on how exactly they were arranged, not even the architects. And historians. Oh, they argue about these ramps like scholars at a dinner party after too much wine. Did the Egyptians use a single straight ramp? A switchback model? A circular spiraling one? There's a papyrus somewhere, now crumbling, that hints at a side ramp lined with cedar beams, but nobody's found the full plan. It's all guesswork and stubborn debate. What's not up for debate is the fact that these ramps require constant babysitting. Stones grind them down, weather breaks them apart, and gravity is not your friend. You and 3 others are handed baskets filled with clay and straw, tasked with smoothing the path ahead of each sled team, and patching any ruts deeper than a sandal. You start mixing the clay, sticking to your fingers like ancient peanut butter. One worker flings a blob too hard and it hits your foot. You stare at him. He shrugs. You nod. The war begins. Soon your ankles are covered in muddy splash marks and the ramp looks no more level than a dune. The foreman appears, arms crossed. You scramble to straighten it up before he invents new creative insults. A large sled lumbers by, pulled by grunting men and indifferent oxen. You press yourself against the side of the ramp to avoid being run over. One man on the sled waves dramatically like a pharaoh in a parade. You do not wave back. After that passes, it's time for incline duty standing, partway up the slope with baskets of water, and a brush made from palm fibers wetting the sand just before the sled reaches it. The moment is crucial too early and the sand dries before use. Too late and the sled grinds to a halt. Timing is everything, and so apparently is being yelled at when you mess it up. Water. Now, a team captain shouts. You dump the basket with theatrical flair. A cheer rises as the sled surges forward, skimming the slick surface like it's wearing sandals made of fish scales. You step aside quickly, catching your breath as the block crests the ramp. Above you, the pyramid's mid-layers are starting to form giant blocks, stacked in clean rows, each one placed with maddening precision. You've seen workers with strings and plumb bobs arguing for hours over a one-finger width misalignment. These people don't play. Up top, a new group receives the sled. They lower long ropes, haul it in, then begin shouting a completely different chant. You wonder if every team has their own theme song. You consider starting one for your ramp crew, something catchy about buckets and regret. At midday, you climb down the ramp's side, feet aching, and sit on a block in the shade. A breeze, blessed and rare, lifts the edge of your head wrap. You pull out a slice of bread still warm from being tucked under your tunic and chew it slowly. The taste is earthy, slightly burnt with the faint flavor of at least its food. Someone nearby sketches a diagram in the sand, an elaborate theory of how the ramps will eventually wind all the way to the summit. You lean over and ask what the squiggly bit is. That's where the goat fell off, they say. You nod solemnly. The goat is becoming a legend. While you're resting, an overseer walks past reading from a scroll, muttering notes like, raise the gradient 4 degrees by flood season. Check support beams for soft soil. You catch none of it. Your brain is full of dust and friction. Still, as you look back up at the ramp, now smooth patched and glistening with just enough water to make the next haul possible, you feel something that isn't quite pride but close. These ramps aren't permanent. They'll be dismantled when the pyramid's complete. But right now, they are lifelines, veins pumping stone upward block by backbreaking block. And you're just the humble platelet, making sure the blood keeps flowing. Tomorrow, maybe you'll get to ride a sled down the ramp when nobody's looking. Or maybe not. That sounds like how people get mysteriously reassigned to manure transport. You stretch your arms, crack your neck, and prepare for another batch of clay. The ramp never sleeps, but you will, eventually. You're back at the site, but today there's no stone hauling, no ramp patching, no clay in your boots today. You're shadowing the supervisors. They glide across the site like royal ducks. Calm, alert, and suspiciously free of visible sweat. You can spot them instantly. Their linen kilts are cleaner, their eyeliner darker, and their sandals less covered in goat prints than yours. They carry staffs not to lean on, but to point at things dramatically. Your task is simple: follow, observe, and try not to get yelled at. Your guide today is a supervisor named Hoary Tall and Thin, with a voice that could cut limestone and eyeliner so sharp it might be a licensed tool. His job is to keep everything moving, workers on schedule, stones in place, and nobody accidentally napping behind the tool shed. Observe, he says, not looking back. The rhythm of a site this large is like a symphony. If one note is off, the song collapses. A moment later, he stops to shout at a man who's hammering in the wrong direction. You're off beat, he yells. Then to you. See, symphony. You scribble that down on a palm leaf, mostly because Hori is watching you and you don't want to disappoint him. The supervisors move from crew to crew, checking not only that the work is being done, but that it looks correct. One man gets corrected not because his rope is tied badly, but because it's tied without enough dignity. You're not sure what that means, but you nod anyway. Supervisors like Hori are trained in both technical skill and social flair. They speak multiple dialects, can quote temple texts, and somehow manage to drink tea in this heat without fainting. You're starting to think the eyeliner gives them power. At one point, Hori takes you up to the planter's hut, a raised platform where scrolls are laid out across a slab of polished stone. Here, other supervisors and site scribes gather hunched over architectural diagrams and supply tallies. One is eating a pomegranate like it's a scroll he's trying to memorize. They're discussing the schedule. We can't haul 30 blocks a day unless the southeastern ramp is reinforced, one says. The southeastern ramp is busy sinking into the Nile's last tantrum, replies another. They argue for several minutes over cubit ratios and whether the oxen teams are secretly slacking. You're fascinated and also completely confused. Historians still argue how tightly structured these massive operations were. Were there rotating teams? Shift systems? Did supervisors like Hori have authority? Or were they glorified middle managers with fancy sandals? Judging by Hori's ability to command a room with just a raised eyebrow, you suspect the answer is somewhere in between. Outside the hut, you pass another supervisor inspecting tool storage. He opens a box, frowns, and immediately summons a young worker to explain why there are only 11 chisels instead of 12. The boy stammers. You realize one chisel has been repurposed as a spoon. You look away. There's a performance aspect to all of this. Supervisors don't just manage, they're the face of the build. When temple dignitaries arrive to inspect progress, it's the supervisors who lead them on the grand tour, pointing out impressive feats and muttering vague phrases like projected completion by high flood. Some of them are former workers themselves, risen through the ranks, thanks to a good eye and louder than average voice. Others, like Hori, probably learned management alongside sacred geometry and eyeliner application. You pause by the shade tent while Hori reviews a scribe's notes. Someone offers you a fig. You take it. It's dry but sweet like success in fruit form. Nearby, a worker complains about being moved to a different team. They don't even chant in rhythm, he groans. Hori turns slightly, raises an eyebrow, and somehow silences everyone within 10 meters. Supervision, he says quietly, is about knowing when to speak, and when your eyebrows can do the work. He's not wrong. As the sun lowers toward the western dunes, Hori wraps up his inspections. He signs a scroll with a flourish, adjusts his eyeliner with a bit of polished obsidian, and nods at you. You didn't faint, he says. You'd make a decent assistant. Then, after a pause, lose the goat smell. You chuckle. You haven't seen the goat all day, which is slightly concerning. You walk back to your quarters, passing workers lounging with their evening bread and gossip. You spot one of Hori's fellow supervisors laughing heartily at a joke you can't hear, then immediately turning and reprimanding someone for leaning too long against a wall. You sit on your mat and stretch your legs, feeling the day's pace settle into your joints. Supervision isn't easier, it's just a different kind of heavy. Fewer ropes, more politics, less sweat, more speeches, and eyeliner, always eyeliner. You close your eyes and wonder if tomorrow maybe they'll let you try yelling at someone for leaning too far left. You've been practicing your eyebrow raise just in case. You wake up expecting another day of hauling or hammering, but instead you're assigned to something much quieter. Something people outside of Egypt keep getting wrong. You're headed to the shade of a small tent near the edge of the village where an older man is sitting on a stool sipping sour beer and surrounded by scrolls, date pits, and a very smug-looking cat. His name is Mena. He's not a priest, not a foreman, not even a supervisor. He's what you might call a truth teller. Today he's going to explain something that's bothered him for years. No, young one, he begins. We are not slaves. You settle onto a mat across from him, legs crossed as he picks up a reed stylus and waves it around like it's a holy relic. People in the far future, he says they'll think we were whipped into building pyramids, that we were starving, dying, and chained. He squints at you. You've had onions and beer today? Yes, you nod. Exactly, and he's right. There's no whip cracking here, just a lot of noise, sweat, and scheduling. In fact, life as a pyramid builder, while hard, has its perks. Decent food rations, warm beds, festival days off, and the occasional bonus goat. Or part of a goat. Probably the less interesting part. Mena stands and gestures around him. Look at this village. Look at the food, the tools, the records. He walks you past a nearby wall where names are scratched into stone workers, signing off their shifts, leaving marks of pride and jokes. One says the drunkards of Menkaur, another the friends of Khufu. These weren't the carvings of prisoners. These were doodles of men who felt like part of something lasting. You wander with him through the laborer's quarter, where someone is baking bread and humming. A child runs past with a toy crocodile carved from scrap wood. Someone else is weaving sandals from papyrus. There are chickens. There are cats. You've started naming the cats. You don't build a monument to eternity with starving people, Mena mutters. You build it with teams, crews, craftsmen. Historians still argue about the full truth, of course. There were likely some conscripted laborers and seasonal workers came in droves, but most evidence points to a rotating labor force people from across Egypt assigned temporary service as a form of tax or civic duty. And they were housed, fed, and on a good day appreciated. As you pass the stonemason's tent, Mena points out an older man with arms like tree limbs and a piece of fish in each hand. That's Pacer. He's been working for 20 years. If he were a slave, do you think he'd be that fat? Pacer waves one fish. You want a bite, you decline politely. Mena stops beside a low table where an offering of bread and herbs has been placed beside a small statue. For the gods, he says, and for our luck. He lights a bit of incense, the smoke curling slowly upward, chasing flies away. Later, as you sit with him watching the sunset, he tells you stories of the builders who came before. The ones who shaped the first pyramid steps or carved tomb inscriptions so perfect that the gods themselves supposedly stopped to admire them. You think the gods would bless slave work, he asks? No. They bless effort, precision, and maybe eyeliner. You both laugh. There's a strange peace in this corner of the site. No shouting, no sleds creaking, just the quiet scratch of a stylus on clay and the soft rustling of linen in the breeze. Before you leave, Mena presses a scrap of papyrus into your hand. On it, a single line written in careful script: "Build with care. Rest with pride." You tuck it into your tunic. You return to the village with the sound of hammers and chants rising in the distance. The sun sinks low, casting golden light over the stone ramp, the half-finished pyramid gleaming faintly like a sleeping god. You walk slower, thinking of Mena's words, of the names carved into walls, of the meals shared, the jokes whispered, the aching backs and bandaged fingers. Not slaves, not just workers, builders, artists, storytellers with dust in their lungs and eternity in their hands. You stretch out on your mat and exhale. Your name might never be carved in stone, but your hands have shaped it, and that's enough. It's early and the air is thick with incense and dust. You're standing at the base of the pyramid again, but today, no hauling, no measuring. Today, you're going inside. Not all the way. Not the deepest chambers. Those are sealed, protected by priests and myth. But the entrance passage, long, dark, sloping, has been opened for inspection, and you've been pulled from your usual duties to help clear debris past tools and definitely not ask too many questions. You duck into the narrow corridor torch, flickering against polished stone. It smells like old air and something faintly metallic. The walls are cool beneath your fingers, smooth in places, roughly etched in others. You can hear the gentle scuff of sandals behind you, and the occasional murmured curse when someone bumps their head. The ceiling is not kind to tall people. At the front of the group, a scribe and a priest whisper in reverent tones. They're here to examine the layout, the shafts, the chambers, the clever hidden joints that still puzzle future archaeologists. The priest carries a small bowl of natron, just in case something spiritual gets active. You try not to dwell on that. You're crouched in what will someday be the grand gallery, a rising, core-belled space that feels larger than it should like. The pyramid grew a ribcage. Light from the torches plays over angled stone beams, each perfectly placed, interlocked, balanced as if the structure is breathing quietly. "See this," the scribe mutters to you, tapping a groove in the wall. "This shaft doesn't lead outside. Or does it? Maybe it's for air. Maybe for the soul." Historians still argue about those very shafts. Were they symbolic ventilation stargazing tunnels? One points directly at Orion's belt. Another seems to go nowhere, or everywhere, or into a very confused bat's living room. Deeper still, the passage tightens. The priest steps ahead, murmuring a prayer. You trail behind, hunched, now torch held low. A chamber opens before you, undecorated but resonant with silence. The stone absorbs sound in a way that makes you whisper without meaning to. In the corner, workers kneel over a carved block, adjusting the fit with wooden wedges and levers. No copper chisels here. This is the domain of precise, shaping silent glances and the careful guidance of the stars. Every chamber inside the pyramid has been built with terrifying precision. Some blocks were floated into place with a margin so narrow you couldn't slide a sheet of papyrus between them. You place your hand along the joint of two such blocks and feel nothing. Just smoothness, just time. The ceiling here is made of massive granite beams hauled from Aswan, hundreds of miles away. Their placement took days of alignment sled pulling and probably a lot of shouting. You look up at them and wonder how many arguments they've absorbed. Someone taps you and hands you a basket of sand and crushed gypsum mortar for filling the tiniest cracks. You step forward slowly, brushing the mixture into a gap barely the width of your thumbnail. It's oddly calming, like tucking the pyramid in for a nap. Outside, you can hear the muffled sounds of the site sleds, creaking workers chanting a faint bleat that you're fairly sure belongs to the goat again. Inside, though, everything is still. There are rumors, always rumors, about hidden rooms. One man swears he saw a chamber that was there in the morning and gone by evening. Another tells stories of a sealed door that hummed softly when touched. You don't know what to believe, but you feel the weight of it all, pressing gently against your chest. You rest for a moment on a stone ledge torch, held above your head, watching the flame dance. The shadows it casts are strange, long layered, almost purposeful. You wonder if the pyramid has always been this quiet, if it's waiting for something or someone, or if it's just watching. Eventually, the priest declares the air favorable and the alignments true. The group files out, brushing dust from their knees and murmuring about angles. You're the last to leave, glancing once more at the empty chamber behind you. It's not really empty, it's full of questions. You step into the sun again, blinking like a mole. The heat hits you, instantly a reminder that the world above still exists, loud and sweaty. You stretch your back and return the torch to its holder. Someone hands you a date to chew. It tastes sweet like stone secrets and victory. You sit near the pyramid base and gaze upward. The outer casing hasn't been applied yet, so the stepped core is visible block after block, stacked with a patience only human hands and lifetimes can supply. It's strange you think how the inside feels both eternal and fragile, as if the builders were trying to capture silence itself, wrap it in stone and offer it to the gods. And you were in there, however briefly. Tomorrow you'll go back to hauling, or smoothing ramps, or counting chisels. But today you touch the inside of something that may never be opened again. And you're fairly certain you still smell like incense. Today begins with shouting, but not the usual move the block, or where's my sandal kind. No, this time it's about oxen. You arrive at the hauling yard to find utter chaos. One sled is tipped over a block, half rolled off. An ox has broken free from its harness and is now trotting toward the cook tent with the smug confidence of an animal who knows it can't be caught by anyone wearing sandals. A young boy is chasing after it, holding a rope, and the vague hope that he'll live through the day. You stand there blinking, trying to process it all before someone decides it's your fault. Eventually, the ox is wrangled, the block is righted, and you're assigned to assist with one of the trickier hauls, a cornerstone headed for the second tier. Not just any stone, it's massive, awkwardly shaped, and according to the foreman, just a bit cursed. You decide he's joking. Probably. Your first job is prepping the sled. Wooden runners lashed with rope and greased with animal fat. You notice someone discreetly adding a small clay amulet to the front, shaped like a frog, with extra legs. For luck, they say. You nod. You're not above accepting help from amphibious deities. Then come the levers. Levers are the unsung heroes of pyramid construction. Wooden poles as thick as your arm wedged beneath the blocks and used to nudge, lift, tilt, whatever's needed to get the stone just that much more cooperative. Today, you're on the back lever team. You jam the lever and count to 3 and all push together. The block groans like a belly full of onions. It shifts. A cheer goes up, but lifting is only the start. Now comes the real trial, the path to the ramp. It's slightly uphill, uneven, and as you're warned, haunted by the memory of that one time an ox tripped and took out an entire sidewall. 2 oxen are hitched to the front, joined by ropes to your team. You each take a position, one guiding the front 2, hauling from the side, you and another steering the back, with long poles trying to keep the block from turning into a runaway sled. Rhythm. Not strength, the foreman shouts. Pull like your mother-in-law's watching. And so you do. You chant. You heave. You lean into the ropes until your spine hums. The sled inches forward, groaning. One ox tries to wander off again, but is bribed back into line with a fig. Historians still argue over the exact techniques used to maneuver large stones across uneven terrain. Some point to sleds and wet sand. Others theorize that rows of logs were rolled beneath. Still others whisper about ancient cranes or forgotten machines, but those are usually the ones wearing the wildest wigs on scroll illustrations. What is certain is this brute strength wasn't enough. It took timing, patience, and just the right amount of grease. As your crew hits the base of the ramp, everything slows. The incline feels sharper today, the sun hotter. You wipe your brow and try not to think about how many more blocks are waiting behind you. The foreman switches tactics. Sing, he yells. I don't care what, just make it loud. So you sing, a nonsense chant about oxen feet and pyramid meat. The rhythm gets you moving. The block crests the first third of the ramp. The oxen, however, have had enough. One lies down. The other begins chewing a sandal that is unfortunately still on someone's foot. There's a pause in the action, a collective sigh. You sit down breathing hard and sip from a water skin that tastes like warm hay and hope. You spend the next hour troubleshooting, adjusting ropes, repositioning levers, dragging fresh palm mats under the sled to reduce friction. Someone slips and slides under the block but emerges unscathed, if significantly dustier. The goat appears again, watches for a moment, then wanders off with the attitude of someone unimpressed by gravity. Finally, with a renewed push and a bribe of dates for the oxen, the sled climbs the ramp fully. The block is rolled into place, measured, nudged, and cheered by the team above. You slump against the side of the ramp and look up. The pyramid is growing not just higher, but more complete. The shape is beginning to form. A slope, a rhythm, a presence. And this stone, you helped it join the chorus. The foreman drops beside you, hands you a piece of hard cheese the size of a pebble. "You didn't die," he says. "Good work." You chew. It tastes like salt and triumph. As you make your way back down the ramp, passing a fresh team with a new block, you overhear someone ask if the last one was the cursed stone. The reply, cursed no, just badly carved. You shrug. Maybe you're just lucky. You glance over your shoulder once more at the oxen. One is lying down again, the other is somehow on the ramp again. You walk faster. It's a rest day. Not for everyone, of course. The oxen still need feeding the ramps, still need tending, and someone's always stuck sharpening chisels until their fingers go numb. But for you and your work group today is a gift from the gods. You start the morning with something scandalous sleeping past sunrise. When you finally emerge from your shared mud brick home, the sun is already warming the village walls, and the usual clamor of hauling teams is refreshingly absent. Instead, the village has the low hum of leisure. Someone is singing softly near the bread ovens. Children play in the dust with clay dolls and carved hippos. An old woman is braiding palm fronds into fans, pausing only to throw bits of bread at a cat that keeps trying to nap in her basket. You're told that the river is calling, and so you join a small group headed to the banks of the Nile. You walk through worn footpaths shaded by the occasional acacia, your linen robe flapping gently in the breeze. It's rare to feel fabric moving without also feeling sweat. Today feels like a blessing. When you reach the river, the sun reflects off the surface in soft gold ripples. The air smells of water and reeds. You strip down to your loincloth and wade in ankle-deep, then waist-deep, until the coolness folds over your shoulders and the heat of the last week finally begins to drain from your bones. The others splash nearby, some swimming, others just floating with arms outstretched, letting the current rock them like sleepy papyrus boats. Someone brought lavender soap. The smell drifts through the air as he lathers his arms, offering the block around with pride. You take a turn rubbing your hands together, watching the suds trail off into the water like tiny offerings. Historians still debate just how common personal hygiene rituals were among laborers, but archaeological evidence shows combs, razors, and even scented oils among their belongings. You don't feel luxurious, but you do feel clean, and that's something. After the river, you dry off in the sun, stretched out on a flat rock like a sunbathing lizard. Someone offers you a honey cake, dry and crumbly, but sweet enough to make your eyes flutter shut with gratitude. You wander back to the village with damp hair and a full stomach. The shade tents are dotted with reclining figures, some napping, others playing seneat on flat stones, the pieces worn smooth from years of quiet competition. You take a spot under the awning and join a game even though you barely know the rules. A man across from you explains every move with increasing exaggeration and wildly contradicting logic. You suspect he's making up half of it. You let him win anyway. Later in the afternoon, you visit the small shrine near the edge of camp. Not a grand temple, just a stone slab with a worn carving of Thoth and a bowl of old offerings. You light a stick of incense and mutter a quick prayer, not for glory or gold, just for another day like this. On the way back, you see a few off-duty craftsmen working on side projects, amulets, tiny statues, even a reed flute someone insists will charm cobras. You raise an eyebrow. He grins and plays a warbly note. A nearby goose honks aggressively and flaps away. Close enough. Evening brings a casual feast, flatbread lentil stew, and someone gasps fresh fish. Where it came from is a mystery. Rumors swirl of a supervisor's birthday, or maybe someone won a bet with the scribe who can juggle. Either way, no one questions it. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. The bread is warm, the stew spiced just enough to tingle your tongue, and the fish slightly smoky, cooked over coals with lemon leaves. A musician begins playing a single-stringed lute. The tune is slow, hypnotic. People hum along, voices, low, eyes half-lidded from contentment and food. One of the foremen walks by, unusually relaxed, holding a cup of wine and not yelling at anyone. He nods at you. You nod back. You stretch out under the stars, the sky, an enormous bowl of blue ink, pricked with stars that flicker like gossip. You spot the familiar ones: Orion's belt, the ibis wing, the falcon's eye. The pyramid looms in the distance, quiet for once, its outline soft and drowsy in the fading light. You close your eyes and smile. Tomorrow the stones will wait. Tonight the river sings. It's dusk when the call comes, soft but urgent. The painters need an extra hand. You blink, still full from dinner, and follow the boy who delivered the message. He's fast ducking between huts and tents, barefoot and seemingly immune to pebbles. You try to keep up, rubbing your stomach and wondering how you've been summoned for art when you can barely draw a straight line in the sand. But this isn't about drawing. This is about carrying things, holding things, occasionally squinting at things while pretending you understand composition. The painter's tent is set up near the overseer's quarters, half covered in linen flaps, and the smell of crushed minerals. Bowls of pigment rest on wooden shelves, red from iron oxide, blue from ground azurite, black from soot. Brushes made from rushes and animal hair are scattered like sleeping spiders. Inside, the master painter Neferhotep is crouched over a slab of limestone, tongue between his teeth. He doesn't look up as you enter. "Hold the torch," he says. "Don't breathe." You obey. The slab depicts a nobleman in an elaborate kilt, one hand holding a lotus, the other gesturing at something. A servant, a goose. It's still just an outline, but already the detail is crisp. You stare, forgetting to blink. Neferhotep dips his brush and drags a line of ochre so steady it seems impossible. Then he grunts and gestures. "That eyebrow's wrong. Bring me a fresh piece." You grab a new slab from a pile by the wall. It's smoother than most polished, slightly curved. You don't know who it's for, but someone important, judging by the guarded expressions of the two apprentices grinding blue pigment in the corner, like they're prepping royal secrets. As the painting continues, you settle into your role. Brush washer, torch holder, occasional distraction. One apprentice asks if you can model your hand for a servant's gesture. You do. He frowns. Less twitchy. You try again. Better, he says, not looking up. The scene they're working on is part of a burial chamber mural. Not inside the pyramid. This is for a tomb near the edge of the necropolis for a man who managed grain stores and was extremely proud of his cattle. You can tell because there are so many cows in the scene you lose count. You watch as an assistant carefully paints the eye of a sacred ibis. Another mixes green from ground malachite and applies it to a palm tree that arches across the top of the panel. There's something meditative about this slow, deliberate strokes, murmured corrections, the scratch of reed against plaster. You forget the ache in your back. You forget the pyramid looming behind you. You forget time. Historians still marvel at the precision of Egyptian tomb art, the guidelines, the pigments, the uncanny consistency across centuries. Some argue the painters followed rigid symbolic rules. Others say there was more improvisation than the records suggest. Tonight, you see a little of both. Neferhotep stops suddenly and mutters, "That nose is wrong." You follow his gaze. He's right. The nobleman's nose looks off. One apprentice begins carefully scraping the surface with a sharpened shell, removing the error with the delicacy of someone shaving a sleeping crocodile. Better, Neferhotep says after a pause. Give him less nose. More wisdom. You pretend to know what that means. Outside, a breeze rustles the tent flaps. A cat walks in like it owns the place, sniffs the pigment bowls, and lies directly on the one cushion reserved for honored guests. Nobody moves it. You help prepare more plaster mixing straw and gypsum until it's thick and sticky. Another apprentice begins sketching the outline of an offering table loaves, jars, figs, and what may be a regrettably detailed fish. It's hard to tell. Someone near the back is practicing hieroglyphs on scrapstone. He writes the word for life, then draws a small turtle underneath. For luck, he explains. Also because I like turtles. You glance back at the nearly finished panel. The nobleman now wears a smug but serene smile. His cows look obedient, his servants mid-task. The scene has taken shape frozen perfection for a man who wanted to be remembered just so. There's a quiet beauty to this work, you realize. The pyramid is for the gods. This is for memory. You clean brushes while the team packs up for the night. Neferhotep finally stands stretching his back with a groan that echoes your own. Come again tomorrow, he says. We'll be painting the fish. You nod. You leave the tent quietly, torchlight flickering behind you. Outside, the pyramid gleams under the stars. You can see the ramp, the stone stacks, the silhouette of workers, still tying off the day's ropes. But tonight your hands smell of ink and clay, and your thoughts are filled with cows and eyebrows. You smile. Tomorrow there will be stones, but tonight there was art. You've been assigned to temple cleaning duty. Not glamorous, not particularly thrilling. But after your last shift balancing paint pots for fish scenes, you figure a little peace and quiet might not hurt. The temple sits just beyond the pyramid's shadow part of the mortuary complex that will one day receive offerings long after your sandals have crumbled to dust. Right now it's a half-finished courtyard of sandstone columns, statues in progress, and one very talkative bird nesting under the eaves. You're handed a brush made from bundled reeds, a clay bucket of water, and instructions so vague they may as well be written in goose tracks. Dust what's sacred, don't touch what's secret. Helpful. You begin with the columns brushing gently. The stone is warm from the morning sun, and etched into it are rows of hieroglyphs, names, titles, and phrases invoking eternal life. The surface is rough, but the carving crisp, almost fresh. You imagine the chisel that made it the steady hand behind it. Beside you, another worker scrubs bird droppings off the foot of a statue. He's lucky, she mutters, means the gods like him. The statue in question is missing a nose. You nod solemnly. As you work, you come across faint graffiti etched lightly in the margins of sacred texts. One says, "I saw Horemheb steal fish." Another is just a crude sketch of a man with enormous ears, possibly meant to represent a certain unpopular scribe. You stifle a laugh. Even here in stone, jokes survive. You move inside to the offering hall, the light dimmer, the air cool with stillness. Rows of altars wait patiently for bowls of food, drink, and incense. It smells faintly of burnt resin and spilled beer. A cat sleeps on one of the altars. You do not disturb it. You know better. On one wall, an image of the pharaoh shows him presenting bread to the gods. The bread is perfect, plump, round, impossibly symmetrical. You squint. No one's ever baked bread like that. Even in Paint Kings get better rations. A priest enters the room quietly, nodding at you. He's carrying a small dish of honey cakes and a flask of beer offerings for the day. He places them with care, lights a small cone of incense, and begins chanting in a low, steady rhythm. You pause your cleaning to listen. It's hypnotic. Words you don't fully understand, but which feel heavy, rhythmic, right? He finishes, bows, and turns to you. That statue there, he says, gesturing to a seated figure with eyes of inlaid quartz, has watched for 70 years. Never blinked. You glance at the statue. It's true, it hasn't. Want to know a secret? The priest continues. You nod because of course you do. He leans in. That statue's back is hollow. Hidden chamber carved from behind. Used to keep scrolls or wine. Depends on who you ask. Historians still puzzle over these hidden spaces and statues and temple walls. Some say they were for sacred writings. Others suggest hiding places for offerings or more practical things like backup sandals. The truth may be all of the above. You spend the next hour polishing a frieze that shows the weighing of the heart ceremony. Anubis with his jackal head adjusting the scale. A heart on one side, a feather on the other. You wonder about your own heart. Heavy light. Somewhere between bloated from all that barley beer. As the sun begins to lower, the temple glows softly through its doorways. Sand drifts in tiny puffs across the floor. You finish sweeping the last step, watching the breeze erase your footprints almost as soon as you make them. Outside, someone is lighting oil lamps along the colonnade. The soft flames flicker like distant stars, and the painted figures on the walls seem to dance in the firelight. You step out, brush in hand, and take one last look at the temple before heading back toward the village. Behind you, the gods sit in stillness, stone eyes fixed on eternity. In your pocket, you've tucked a small chip of sandstone. It broke off from a column earlier, and it fits perfectly in your palm. It's not sacred, not officially, but it feels like something worth keeping. You walk back under the fading light, the pyramid to your right casting a long, cool shadow across the sand. A bird squawks above. You look up. It's perched on the same statue. Definitely the god's favorite. You wake with sand in your ears and a mild sunburn on one ankle. Classic signs of a desert storm. Last night the wind came fast, howling across the Giza plateau like a sky chariot had lost a wheel. You remember pulling your linen wrap tighter and watching as your water jug rolled across the room, followed closely by a goat. You still don't know whose goat it is, but it's certainly not yours. It never is. This morning the sky is a strange pale gray with sunlight poking through like a lamp under a worn blanket. You step outside to find the village in cleanup mode, tents, half-collapsed laundry now mysteriously in someone else's house in sand, where sand has absolutely no business being. You're assigned to post-storm detail clearing debris from the ramps and pathways. It's gritty, thankless work, but at least it's a change from lifting oxen by accident. You wrap a cloth around your mouth and nose and head toward the site. The ramp looks like it was swallowed and then burped out again by a very dusty god. Sand is heaped along the edges, wedged into every crack, and piled like sleepy dunes across the sled tracks. You begin with a palm broom, sweeping in long, rhythmic strokes. Others around you do the same, moving like waves along the ramp. Occasionally, someone sneezes so hard it startles a bird into flight. Somewhere off to the side, a man tries to rescue a wheel that has sunken into the sand like a shipwreck. A foreman walks by, pausing to inspect your section. Clean, he says. But not clean, clean. You nod, then sweep twice as hard out of spite. Mid-morning, the wind kicks up again just enough to blow sand back onto what you've already cleared. You sigh. The man beside you mutters, Ra's just playing dice with us now. You believe him. The storm hasn't only left sand. The sun, once it burns through the haze, brings with it an aggressive heat. You've experienced heat before, normal heat, chisel heat, hauling a stone at noon heat. But this is worse. This is heat that feels personal. You pull your linen tighter and try to keep your pace slow. Fast work will only make the sweat come faster, and there's no point in trying to win a race against the desert. Someone nearby groans dramatically and sits on a stone, fanning themselves with a broken chisel. It's so hot, they say, I saw a lizard walk into the beer tent and faint. You laugh despite yourself. Maybe it was your goat. By afternoon, the worst of the storm damage has been cleared. The ramps are passable again, the tools uncovered, and the blocks that were mid-haul are once more positioned, ready to creep upward tomorrow. Historians still argue how often construction was interrupted by weather. Some claim the work continued nearly year-round. Others suggest the worst heat and seasonal flooding brought natural pauses. What's certain is that even the mighty pyramid project bowed to the moods of nature now and then. You take a moment to rest near a scaffolding pole, sipping slowly from your water skin. The water is warm and a little gritty. You drink it anyway. That's when you notice your arm. Red. Freckled. Definitely uneven. You pull up your sleeve and wince. A perfect diagonal sunburn slices across your shoulder, proof that you've been working hard and also at a very stupid angle. A friend walks by, squints, and says, nice gradient. You throw a pebble at him. He throws a date pit back. Balance is restored. As the day winds down, someone brings out a small oil jar of aloe and begins rubbing it on sunburned arms, faces, even one poor man's feet. You sit in line waiting your turn, watching the light fade from gold to amber to something soft and forgiving. The pyramid glows again in the dusk, its unfinished tears catching the last rays like a crown made of sun and patience. It still looks impossibly large, but not as impossible as when you first arrived. Tomorrow the ramps will be busy again. The blocks will roll, the chants will rise, and the oxen, God's willing, will walk in a straight line. But tonight, as you soak your arms and trace the fresh patterns left by sand and sun, you feel like part of the land itself. Scarred, sweaty, slightly ridiculous, but deeply quietly enduring. Just like the stone. There's a rare hum in the air today. Not the usual grunt and groan rhythm of hauling, or the slosh of beer in clay jugs. It's something else. Anticipation. Word has spread the final layer of facing stones is being placed, and the golden capstone, the pyramidion, is arriving soon. You won't be setting it yourself, of course. That honor goes to a specially chosen team with excellent balance, impeccable knots, and presumably a lack of vertigo. But you'll be watching. Everyone will. First, though, there's more work to be done. You're back on finishing duty, prepping the last stretch of smooth casing stones, now being slid into position with painstaking care. These aren't rough cut like the interior blocks. These are the pretty ones. Dressed limestone bright enough to catch the sun and blind a careless ibis. You help lift one into place using a combination of levers ropes and 3 separate people yelling slightly different commands. It nestles perfectly beside its neighbors, so snug you can barely fit a reed between the joints. Then comes the plaster. You mix it carefully fine gypsum dust water and a bit of clay until it's thick but spreadable. You and another worker smooth it over the seams with wooden trowels, shaping each line with the kind of patience usually reserved for sculpture or particularly tricky sandals. As you work, you can hear laughter nearby. Someone claims a statue was placed with the wrong beard curved instead of straight. Now he looks like a court jester, they joke. The foreman grumbles but doesn't correct it. Secretly, you think he agrees. Then a whisper spreads, "The capstone is coming." You abandon your post for just a moment, just long enough to catch a glimpse of it. It arrives on a padded sled covered in linen and flanked by priests muttering blessings, probably for protection, probably also for dramatic effect. It's smaller than you imagined, just a few cubits tall, but gleams even beneath the cloth edges, catching sunlight like a mirror to the gods. Historians still debate whether the pyramidion was actually covered in gold or electrum. Some say it was solid. Others suggest a thin overlay. Either way, the effect would have been dazzling, especially at sunrise when Ra's first light hit the peak and turned the sky itself into a crown. You help as much as you're allowed, passing ropes, soaking ramps, running messages. Mostly you try not to get in the way. You hear the signal a conch horn, long and low. Then the chant begins. Workers above form a line along the summit, pulling in rhythm. The capstone rises slowly, lifted by ropes and cradled by a scaffold so complex it looks like a very serious spiderweb. You and everyone else below hold your breath. The chant rises, the ropes tighten. The sun glints off the linen covering. The pyramid seems to lean slightly forward, just watching, and then it rests. A cheer erupts soft at first, then building like a flood. Hands go up, fists pump, someone throws a piece of bread in the air. The goat bleats dramatically. Even the foremen smile. It's done. Or nearly so. There are finishing touches still, painting, smoothing, maybe a final inspection by someone with a terrifying scroll and a lot of opinions. But the shape, the crown, the presence, it's complete. You sink to the ground, exhausted and elated. Your hands are cracked. Your feet have developed a distinct opinion about sandals. Your back feels like it belongs to a statue now. But your heart feels oddly light. Nearby, someone quietly mentions that a small idol was found missing, a statue of a local deity usually kept inside the overseer's tent. Probably stolen, someone mutters. Or buried inside the pyramid for good luck, says another. Or says a third, it walked off on its own. You look toward the pyramid's peak. Anything feels possible today. You head back to the village slowly. People are out in the streets. some dancing, others just sitting quietly watching the sun set behind the finished peak. It glows now, touched by gold, kissed by sky. There's a feast tonight. You've heard rumors of figs, honeyed bread, even meat. The workers who laid the last stone are being carried around the village like victorious charioteers. You don't mind. You were part of it too. One block, one rope, one sliver of effort at a time. You return to your hut, wash your hands, and change into your cleanest tunic. You find a piece of stone, smooth palm-sized, marked with a small red line. You've kept it for weeks. Tonight you place it on your shelf. Not because it's valuable, because it's yours. Tomorrow the site will begin to wind down. The ramps will come apart. The sleds will be reused. Some will leave, others will stay. But tonight the pyramid is whole. And so for a little while and now you wait. The frenzy has passed. The final stone rests where it was meant to, the golden cap gleams beneath the sun, and the pyramid no longer feels like a project. It feels like a presence. The ramps are being dismantled. Day by day, the earthen zigzags that once wound their way to the summit are peeled back and flattened. You walk along them one last time before they vanish, paths you once cursed, slipped on, sweated over, now fading into memory like tracks washed away by floodwater. Workers begin leaving. Some wave goodbye, slapping backs, exchanging bits of polished limestone or old tools as keepsakes. Others slip away quietly at sunrise, bundled into carts with oxen headed back to farms, towns, temples. Life beyond the pyramid resumes. You stay behind a while longer, assigned to the final inspection crew, walking the edges of the monument, checking joints, smoothing corners, whispering quiet curses at anyone who left behind crooked plasterwork. It's slow, gentle work. No more hauling, no more levers. Just you, your brush, and the sound of wind curling around the stone like a lullaby. One morning, a tourist from the palace arrives. Not a pharaoh, not even a priest, just a noble's nephew with too much linen and not enough sense. He asks how it was built. You point to your arms, your back, your feet, then to the sky. He doesn't get it. You watch him leave sandals still clean. Later, you help with the final task, erasing the workers' marks. Not the graffiti or the hidden jokes, those quietly are left untouched. But the tally notches, the temporary lines of red ink, the guide marks, those must be scrubbed, vanished, as if the pyramid had risen from the desert, on its own, immaculate and eternal. You and another worker, someone who once slipped into the Nile with a bucket of beer and refused to apologize, take turns chiseling off the last measurement stroke. Now it's truly the gods, they say. You nod. At night, the site is almost silent. The songs are gone. No chants. Just the whisper of wind and the creak of ropes being packed away. You lie on your back looking up. The pyramid's shadow cuts across the sand like a memory. It's not white yet, that brilliance will come later, after the casing stones bleach and shine in the sun for years. But already it glows. You remember every step, every blister, every time you thought this block will be the end of me. And now it's just there, massive. Sleeping? There's something peaceful about it, something final, but not in a sad way, in the way of a deep sigh after long effort. Historians still argue whether pyramids were built to reach the stars or anchor the soul, whether they were tombs or temples, clocks or calendars. But you've been inside it, not just its chambers, but its days, its jokes, its arguments about paint colors, its muddy footprints and elbow bruises. You know the truth. It was built by people, tired people, creative people, people who forgot tools, argued over rope knots, sang off-key, and cried quietly behind half-finished walls. And yet, this thing still rose. At the edge of the site, a priest seals the ceremonial entry. A small procession lights incense and places an offering of figs and bread beside the outer wall. For the journey, he says, you leave a scrap of linen behind tied to a post. It flutters in the breeze like it's waving goodbye. The goat, of course, is still here. Watching. You sit for a long time beside the last stone. No one asks you to move. No one hurries you. Eventually you rise and walk away. The pyramid does not follow, but it never really leaves.